who lived through that, who was in Karachi, who witnessed the bloodshed, who got caught in the middle of the violence on the streets. I think the death of Benazir is a moment in time for almost every Pakistani. So the big question, I'll ask you the big question straight up. Who killed Benazir?
Well, he was killed by a 15-year-old boy called Bilal. Not much is known about him. It is an astonishing fact that the police, I think, never even interviewed his family or made any effort to contact them in the way that Pakistanis view politics. Perhaps that's not so surprising. He was seen as a tool, which is what he was, of greater forces, so people didn't pay much attention to him, but nonetheless, it is an extraordinary fact. Parts of his body ended up in Cambridge, rather oddly, as the investigators asked British scientists to examine the remains of Bilal, which they did, and established he probably was 15 years old. So that's who killed him. He was trained as a suicide bomber in those years when that was so common in Pakistan by the TTP. And the TTP helped organize the killing as they had organized the first attack in Karachi that you mentioned. So that much is clear. It's also pretty clear that Al-Qaeda was involved in commissioning this attack, that bin Laden, or at least his top people, were aware it was coming and had an interest in it and had given their support to the idea and thought they could get some credit out of it. It was a time when Al-Qaeda was on the back foot, and this was seen as a way of claiming an attack which they could get some credit for, even though the Taliban were the ones who would actually do all the work. So those two organizations were involved. And of course, the next question is, did they have the support and facilitation of the Pakistani state? I can't say that they did, but I suspect there were elements of the state who were aware of the plot and who let it go by, or maybe even facilitated it.
So the introduction of the book deals with all the emotions of it, but when we do actually get on the chapter on the assassination, you do leave all these puzzle pieces without actually saying it. The puzzle pieces are all there for somebody to put together. So if we are to make a case, the idea, first of all, the idea that it was hosed down. Saud Aziz is on record in private and public, and through my sources as well. He is still on record saying he acted alone. But the UN Commission that you talk about, they also find it unbelievable. And I believe it was General Nadeem who went on record saying he was the one who ordered Saud Aziz to hose the crime scene down. How big of stupidity almost is it to hose down a crime scene? Is it enough to at least be skeptical and think of culpability when such an action is committed?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's just, I mean, the hosing down of the crime scene is symbolic of a wider cover-up, and clearly there was a cover-up, and the UN investigators speak quite openly about the fact that they were frustrated in their investigation. The Pakistani state was obstructing their work, and there are many other aspects to the cover-up. Most of the people involved in the plot to kill Benazir were murdered in various forms over the few weeks and months that came after her death. So, the cover-up was far-reaching, comprehensive, consistent, and definitely involved the civilian and military sides of the government. Rahman Malik clearly was orchestrating it, and who was asking him to do it? I don't think it's too difficult to guess. So, one of the issues that came up is, why didn't Asif Zardari, as president, investigate his wife's murder with greater enthusiasm? I mean, for what it's worth, my understanding of that, but it's difficult to prove anything, and he denied it to me when I asked him. But nonetheless, it would seem to me that he probably reached an accommodation with the military that he would not be investigating this murder if his route to the presidency was clear. So, lots of people didn't want to know who killed Benazir. It's a shocking fact. I mean, for all her faults, and she had faults which were quite significant, the fact is she was an important person in Pakistani history. She had a popular base. She had a role to play. And no one, even her close family, were interested in the question of who killed her.
reading about all the people that were killed close to the investigation, maybe I should be looking over my shoulder after asking these questions. But since you did mention Rehman Malik, right at the start of the book, you mentioned how Rehman Malik first said that he acted alone in fleeing the crime scene. And then he said the police told him to flee the crime scene. And it's almost evocative or symbolic or representative of what happened to Quaid-e-Azam as well. The founder of the nation could not get an ambulance. And then it baffles the mind to think that the most popular leader of the time in Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, Nahid had to hail a taxi in an attempt to get her to the hospital. We think about all the resources of the party and the state, and it came to a point where Benazir was dying and they do not have a car to take her to the hospital.
It is an extraordinary fact. It is exactly how it happened, what you describe, and it is shocking. And it is to the great discredit of the police. Well, they would probably say they had no choice. They're acting on orders not to be there. But certainly for the close colleagues of Benazir who abandoned her in her time of need, it is utterly shocking.
So since you had already mentioned Zardari, that's what the national narrative is. It probably a lot of it stems from Musharraf's statement when he was asked, since he was the primary accused, at least that's what Benazir said as well, especially in the letter that she wrote to Gul Blitzer, he is who is named, or at least added to the names. Musharraf's statement was Zardari, he benefited the most. And now the national almost narrative is Zardari killed his wife. Is there any truth to that apart from the fact that he became president?
No truth at all, in my view. No evidence for it at all. I think he failed to investigate the murder, but there is no reason to believe, in my view, that he was involved in the plot to kill her in any form. No, I mean, I've looked at it very closely over a period of some years, and I've just never seen anything that indicates that's the case.
So you did give a cursory mention to that. A lot of social media experts, as I would pejoratively call them, mentioned the fact that he did not ask for a postmortem, but I also agree with you. What good would have a postmortem done? It was quite clear what killed him.
Right, yeah, it's quite clear. I mean, I'm sure there are cultural reasons why he may not have wanted a postmortem too, but it's a matter of very limited significance. It got a lot of coverage, but I just don't think that I accept what you say, that most Pakistanis seem to think he was involved. But again, I just don't think he was.
If we do go back.